And we're live. Hello, hello. Welcome. Happy Thursday, everyone. This is our Feed Real Institute live show. And today I have a special guest with me. I've got Hannah Mandelbaum from Evermore Pet Food. Welcome, Hannah. Thanks for being
Hi,
with us.
hi, Ruby. Thanks. It is great to be back here. I always love our conversations.
Likewise. Today we're going to be talking about the avian flu, which is one of Hannah's favorite topics to discuss.
It's because I have like this zombie apocalypse fear, and I'm pretty sure the end of the world is going to come like when one animal virus like mixes with rabies.
Well, and honestly, like you are the person that I turned to, like quite literally when the avian flu came up. You were the first person that I emailed. I was like, hey, this is random. Haven't talked to you in a few weeks, but what is actually going on? So, we're going to be talking about the avian flu, food safety generally, and your dogs. So if you're new here and you haven't been live with us before, we go for about an hour, a good 30 or 40 minutes chatting it up, and then open the floor for Q&A for Hannah to answer any questions you might have. This is a big topic, so I do expect a lot of people to be interested in what we've got going on and a little bit confused because it's very complex, right? So if you guys think of any random questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments and we'll get to them when we do our Q&A. In the meantime, if you've just joined us, would love to know where you're joining from and if concerns about the avian flu have come to your city. I think that's a really important part of our conversation, location-wise. Yeah, but before we dive in, I'm just going to do a nice, beautiful introduction bio for you, Hannah, if
Ooh,
that's okay.
I'm
Yeah.
flattered.
Awesome. So, Hannah is the co founder of Evermore Pet Food, a pioneering brand in the fresh pet food space, known for its ethical and transparent ingredient sourcing. With 2 decades of experience in the pet industry, first as a pet care business owner and a certified professional dog trainer, and for the last 15 years with Evermore, she has developed extensive expertise in animal welfare, responsible sourcing, and pet food marketing claims. Hannah is also going to be a speaker at this year's Feed Real Summit, which is here in San Diego this October. So if you like what you're hearing from Hannah today, you're definitely going to want to come on board and get tickets for this year's summit. Thank you again, Hannah, for being with us. Looking forward to our chat.
Me too. Right last night, before, on the eve of this chat, I got a news alert that there was an avian flu infection at a live poultry market in Queens. So this isn't just a big farm in the country situation. It can happen even in the cities.
Yeah, absolutely. And really all over the world because avian flu is not a new thing. It's been around for quite some time.
Decades. Actually, the Spanish flu of 1918 that, killed what was like 50 million people worldwide, that was an avian flu.
Oh, shit.
it
Know
had
that.
it had sort of combined with another virus, they think a swine flu, and became a
Yeah.
pandemic. So
And that's why this is scary for so many people because there are different types of animals that are getting the avian flu, but there are people as well that are potentially affected. So yeah, again, if you're just joining in, would love to know where you're joining from and if concerns about the avian flu have reached you or your city yet. So I know, Hannah, you're really good at simplifying complex topics. Can you take a stab and explain what the avian flu is, how it spreads, why dog parents should be concerned, if at all?
sure. So the avian flu is what it sounds like. It's a flu that affects birds. It's mostly associated with migratory waterfowl for the most part, but it can infect mammals. It can infect all types of birds. And what makes it so dangerous is birds traverse the globe. I mean, there are birds that like literally swim across oceans. So there can be an outbreak in one part of the world that gets to a completely different continent, which is what we're seeing with this current outbreak. It actually started in 2020 in Europe, and this mutation, and it made it across the ocean and has been really, at first became a big problem here in 2022 when we first started seeing die-offs at poultry farms. It's actually when our turkey prices went through the roof. which, and people have noticed like egg prices are going up, poultry prices are going up, and a big part of that is because of avian flu. In terms of, everyone thinks that, yeah, birds, but can affect 180 different types of animals so far to date that we've seen. There's even been a marine mammal die-off, like it's like devastating seal populations.
What? How is it spreading?
Okay, that's actually very good. It spreads through, bird feces, and it can actually be windborne as well. So once these virus particles are in the air, they've actually discovered that it can travel on the wind. Like all flus, it is a respiratory virus, but it also, a lot of flus are very surface contaminant heavy. So you can get it from touching a surface that has the flu on it and wiping your face. So just like every other public health issue we've had, like wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands.
And if it travels through feces, I mean, dogs are notorious for.
Dogs love their feces.
Right.
Or just like, gross, dead, rotting things on the ground. But so in terms of dogs and cats, right, and we're really here for the dogs. There have been.
Says the cat owner.
Says the cat owner. I mean, I used to be both. But so with cats, it's a very, very fatal, neurologically obvious disease. Cats are highly susceptible to it. Since this outbreak has begun here, we've heard of dozens of cats dying from the disease, mostly on dairy farms from drinking raw milk, but also there have been a few cases of raw pet food. And again, you can tell when a cat has it. It's like extremely fatal to cats. They get weird neurological symptoms. Now, when dogs get it, and they do seem to be less susceptible and handle it better. And there are only like a handful of cases where we've known of pet dogs dying like worldwide. Very, very, very few.
And I don't think any dog cases have really made the headlines. There was that.
Nothing has made the headlines. I think last year there were a couple dogs in Canada. But the dog that like we knew about that died is like from the early 2000s in Asia. So it was from eating a duck.
And then earlier this year, there was that cat that passed away. And there was a lot of speculation.
There were a lot of cats that passed away at this point. There have been 1, 2, like 3. There have been several raw company recalls, which we can get into in a little while. It seemed like a couple of them are legitimate and one wasn't. But so dogs, in terms of like dog susceptibility to the flu and the symptoms, their symptoms are, you're going to see sort of maybe some respiratory issues, lethargy, drop in appetite, fever, and in some cases conjunctivitis. And we know that dogs can die from this, 1, because there have been a couple cases, and 2, because there was this really messed up study that happened about 15 years ago where, in terms of like animal cruelty stuff, I don't want to discuss it too much, but let's just say they gave a bunch of dogs the flu. And I don't want to really finish the rest of what went down in that study.
All right.
But we know it is very capable of making dogs very sick, and it is very capable of killing them. So if you do have a dog that exhibits any of these symptoms, be good to get them to the vet. And more veterinary hospitals are actually testing cats and dogs that come in with flu symptoms. They're doing deeper analysis to find out, is this an avian flu? Because it is that big of a concern.
Yeah, no, I mean, and understandably so, especially knowing how it's transmitted between different species of animals. How has this affected what you guys do at Evermore? Because your food is not raw. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, we do get a lot of questions. And again, we are in a fairly lucky position where we've been making a food that meets all of the avian flu, like safety requirements for a very long time. Like really, given safe handling, this shouldn't be an issue at all for us, which again is really lucky, but it doesn't mean that we don't do everything we can to make sure that we're not getting infected product to begin with. And I think this is where across the board, whether you're feeding raw, whether you're feeding cooked, it starts with your supply chain. And we're really lucky. We work with a great, producer for chicken, Mary's Chicken, up in Sanger, and in a way, the birds that we're using aren't safer than these like lower welfare factory farm birds because they're pasture chickens. They go outside, right? They are just as susceptible to contracting avian flu as these like horribly factory farmed, cruelly raising practices. Like any bird is susceptible, but we have a responsible supplier who takes extreme biosecurity measures. When we went to visit them, I remember we had to like put on these big Tyvek suits, like wipe our feet down and like this like soap stuff. And and at that point we weren't, there's like dips, and it was kind of like low outbreak time in terms of there'd been a little bit of a lull when we were visiting them. I don't even know what their visitor policy is now. I would imagine they probably don't have outside visitors at the moment. But the plants that are doing it right, they're like disinfecting their trucks, they're giving their workers PPE. They're doing all of these things to make sure that the biosecurity isn't threatened. And that's really important. And another thing is just like the communication. We're working directly with our suppliers. It's not like there's a middleman involved, so things can't get confused. Right. And like, oh, this case came from here. So it's really important to have a direct relationship with your supplier.
Well, beyond those biosecurity measures, I mean, you talked about what symptoms we might see in our dogs should they contract the avian flu, but what would we potentially see in poultry? And this would not just for food that you're buying that's pre-made and for the suppliers, but like for those of us that sometimes have little hennies in our backyard.
They get real sick real fast. Like the dog, like they can be dead within 24 hours. So yeah, I mean, it is not. And part of the big problem with these factory farms is it like spreads so quickly, and sometimes like across 100,000 birds. So the bird will have like neurological symptoms. It'll be very obvious that you're dealing with a very sick bird. It's not like your dog, like, oh, he has a runny nose.
And if I'm not mistaken, a lot of the protective measures that are taken is that, they'll wipe out an entire flock when it comes, especially in factory farms, because that contamination can spread so easily. Is that what you've been seeing?
Yeah, I mean, that's the policy. And actually, in a lot of cases, like culling out or depopulating it, they call it depopulating it. That really is the most biosecure thing to do. And in a lot of it's actually kinder to the birds in theory. But yeah, they have to wipe out these entire flocks. There's like a zero tolerance. Like one bird is discovered, they all get depopulated.
Yeah.
And the disease itself is really, really hard for the birds to go through. It's very, it's not humane for them to have this situation. But the way that these birds are being depopulated in factory farms is incredibly cruel, which basically they're just turning off the AC and letting these birds just cook to death in these overcrowded barns, so they overheat. So that's just absolutely, I mean, that's heartbreaking. That's happening.
Just checking our comments here real quick. We have Tisha from Dubai. And she says all of our food is imported, and so it's as concerning for me both as a pet parent and a professional in the holistic space, which, as you said, because it can spread pretty much everywhere, anywhere worldwide, especially for imported food. I think those concerns are mirrored not when it comes to just pet food, but human food.
Yeah, I mean, it's for sure. And this is, it really is. Well, we're a human grade company, and actually making human grade food and using human grade suppliers puts you in a better position for making sure that avian flu isn't getting into your food, because there is USDA inspection, right? There is animal inspectors when you're in the human food supply chain. There's people looking out for this. Whereas if you're just not going through those human grade channels, there's meat that's not getting inspected. There's dying animals that are being slaughtered and going into pet food. So it really, as a pet parent, I would advise, and whether it's cooked or raw, to really go for human grade sourcing with the companies, because that's where you at least have some safeguards in place.
Sure.
That's really important. And for Tisha in Dubai, actually, this is really, you can't get our chicken. Or you can get our chicken, but you won't get it if it's vaccinated. We talked about this, Ruby.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Oh,
let's talk about this. Okay, I totally want to jump in.
You can share with everyone the email that I sent you.
Back and Yeah, Ruby sent me this email about the avian flu and how she heard that there was a vaccine available, but they're not giving it to birds because of the export restrictions, and that is true. So the U.S. has a $6 billion poultry export industry. And if birds are vaccinated, and there is a bird flu vaccination, it's actually been really successful in Europe. They've been really good at containing their outbreaks, and it's because they're doing things like vaccinating their birds. But the international market won't buy birds that have been vaccinated because it can mask the presence of like an actual infection. So instead of vaccinating the birds, which is probably going to change very soon, by the way, we are bailing out the poultry industry. We are bailing out the poultry industry. Our tax dollars are going to pay for farmers to kill chickens.
Yeah, but you wouldn't know that because of the egg prices.
Right? You would not know that because of the egg prices. Yeah, I mean, so they just announced this new $1 billion initiative through the USDA to deal with avian flu.
With vaccines.
And not just vaccines. There's actually, that's a piece of it as like one of the scientific pieces of it. It's like a 5-pronged plan. And some of it, the vaccine is one part of it. Biosecurity measures are another part of it. Then there is compensating farmers for lost wages. And this is the part I find hilarious. There is $100 million allocated in this to compensate farmers for lost wages. We have already spent $1.62 billion on compensating farmers for lost wages. Right? Like, what? But there's one part of this that's really, really concerning. And that is to roll back certain animal welfare legislation. So in order to somehow stop the spread of avian flu and make things cheaper, it's a non sequitur. This is just an excuse to roll back legislation. We're talking about things like Prop 12, which for those of you who are not from California, it's basically the protection for people. California can basically set their own rules, being we won't buy pigs that are raised in gestation crates. So it's sort of like these interstate animal welfare laws. Like Nevada, they have a cage-free law. They're talking about rolling that back. All of these things actually would make the problem worse. It would be increasing the number of animals in confinement. So that means more animals are dying in one place. So this is sort of taking advantage of this crisis that's happening right now.
Sure.
To help big ag and not really looking at the problem.
Right, because essentially, I mean, there's several things that drive up the cost to run a business, right? Every step in the process for big ag, and whether that's implementing more biosecurity measures, PPE for, their workers, that's going to drive up the cost. So the less they have to do, the less they have to spend on something like that. So I'd imagine a lot of the things that you're mentioning are being rolled back, not just in terms of animal welfare, are because they're going to be losing money adding all of these extra steps.
Well, that the government's paying for. So the rest of that $1 billion plan is going to PPE and upgrading farms. And then some of it is going to scientific research. But it's like all of these plans are like super vague. There hasn't been any discussion about what actually means. The biosecurity measures that I've seen publicly discussed already exist. At least they already exist in good operations. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't seem like anything like revolutionary is happening here. And the other thing that I've noticed about this plan that's just been rolled out is that it's first of all, it's chicken centric. Wait till we get into cows. But it's very much about this one sector of the industry and propping that up, but it's not about looking at this as a pandemic. This is about like helping chicken farmers and farming interests. It's not looking at this as a health problem. Like there's no involving like the NIH or the CDC, it's very isolated to like, this is a USDA program.
Yeah. So let's sort of get into that a little bit. I mean, is this a legitimate concern for you? And should it be for pet parents when it comes to their dogs, as well as, to their own human health? Like,
absolutely. We should all be very concerned. Viruses mutate incredibly quickly. every time anything gets infected, there's a chance for mutation that will make it more infectious to something else. You know, there are newer strains of avian flu since this whole thing started that are more transmissible to mammals. And right now we're very lucky. There doesn't seem to be any evidence of like in the US of like human to human transmission or like otherwise like mammals transmitting to each other. Although there is just research out of Chile that it seems like there are like populations of mammals transmitting it to each other, at least for a strain down there, which is terrifying. But this isn't just an issue for cats or dogs. This is like the entire world. Like wildlife is dying off. This is something we should all like care very deeply about, and solving it not just on the chicken farmer level. This should be something that's looked at as a global health problem.
Yeah, no, I get that. Is there a vaccine for people?
There is actually. There's a vaccine for people. There's a vaccine for chickens. The human vaccine obviously needs to be updated, and it would need to be updated for this strain. I think there's some in reserve, but there's no plan for like rolling it out or anything like that. And you know, we're dealing with this administration that might not be too friendly for that either. In terms of fatality rates in people, this strain actually seems to be much less fatal than instances in the past. Like the last breakout in Asia, I think it was like a 50% fatality rate. So that's terrifying. And we're a lot lower. There have been in the US, there have been about 70 people infected, and one of them has died and 2 are seriously ill. So
I'd imagine it's people that are working directly with poultry that are.
It is mostly people that are working directly with poultry, farm workers and dairy workers as well. There are a couple of outliers in cases where they're like, how did this person get it? I mean, cats, it's like cats at dairy barns, which actually, this is a good segue to dairy. This is, you know, it's avian flu. People don't think of it as a dairy thing, but actually close to 1,000 dairy herds have been quarantined. They go back into production. With the cows, it's not like it is with the birds. Like it doesn't kill them. It just like basically gives them colds. Like they'll get runny noses and it will reduce their milk production. So they'll quarantine these herds. And then once the infection is passed, they kind of go back into, being their cow selves and getting milked again. Yeah. And there has been cases with cats, of it being transmitted through raw milk.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to dive into those cases, as well as, pet food safety generally. But before we get off the topic of vaccines, I'm just curious, in a perfect world for you, how would you want to handle this situation?
I mean, if there were safe, effective vaccines, I would say use the safe, effective vaccines. And I would also say, use biosecurity. I don't think that there's one answer to this situation. I think honestly, this is such a dangerous moment that every weapon to fight it needs to be used. And there are like scientists doing really cool work monitoring migratory bird paths and just like really interesting modelings to identify which farms are at highest risk. They're actually doing that in California. They've just it was like a private scientific project, but if that sort of thing were implemented like across the country, that could really help mitigate things. But I don't think that the current approach is as scientific as it could be. Let's just put it that way.
Okay.
But yeah, in a perfect world, we would do everything we can.
Yep. All right. Heard. Yeah. Okay. So, we've gotten a lot of questions.
There were questions
about, no, just sent it to us generally about feeding poultry due to the avian flu. I mean, should we be concerned about, I understand, checking out the supply chain. Is this a valid concern of poultry that pets are being fed?
I think it is a valid concern. I think, back to recalls, right? So right now there was Northwest Watcher. Sorry, I'm like counting on my fingers. I think that there have been 4 recalls now associated with pet foods. They've all been with smaller companies. 3 of them are completely legitimate. They've all been poultry formulas. I think
legitimate in the sense that
they actually found avian flu in the food.
Okay.
That basically they
what
were all
prompted
cats.
them to test it?
Cats coming in, getting sick and dying. Basically, there were all cases where raw-fed cats had come in and, to veterinary hospitals presenting these neurological symptoms and dying, and the food then being taken and tested by the FDA for avian flu, the strains in the cat and the strains in the food matching. So in those cases, there were 3 cases with 3 different food companies, all of which are very, very small, like almost vanished. Like they make us look like a big company, I think, for these others. So these are small companies, and they issued recalls. There was another company which has been national news, so I don't mind naming them, Northwest Naturals. That, and they're freeze dried, they're HPP. Like there was, but a cat had died, and actually Northwest Naturals, like they handled it so well. I have to say, they immediately, upon being informed.
Can you sort of go through that? I mean, you seem intimately familiar with those details.
I follow this stuff so much. Okay, so basically, this cat came to a hospital, had avian flu, died, had been eating Northwest Naturals. I think there was even like an Instagram post involved. The Northwest Naturals issued a recall. Like they were super responsible and upfront about it. They actually had a hard time getting like a speedy inspection. It took them 6 weeks for the Oregon State Department of Agriculture and the FDA to conclude their investigation, which concluded that there was no avian flu and that it wasn't an issue. And the cat involved was actually like one of these adventure cats that like goes out on field trips on Instagram. But so the cat had opportunity to come into contact with avian flu just by virtue of being an animal that goes outdoors. Right. So I can't even, as a small business, like my heart truly goes out to them because they actually were super responsible. Their sourcing and food safety practices are really good, but they took a real brand hit from that. And of course, that's when like all of these food companies are putting out their statements about avian flu and why their food is safe, right? Every raw company put out a statement. And I have to say, most of them like were not confidence inspiring at all. There's only one company. I'm not going to say which company, but there's a company that used HPP, and they like literally listed the specifics of their HPP process, which are entirely, every company treats this as like extremely
proprietary.
Proprietary. Thank you. I was like totally like skipping over my words there. Every company treats their HPP protocols as proprietary. This Instagram like slider post had the exact protocol. And I thought to myself when I read this, oh, this is so cool. A company that's actually being transparent here. I sent my friend a link to the post. They're like, there's no post here. I went back to look. There was a revised version of the post. I'm like, oh, some social media manager got in trouble. Yeah. But honestly, I think we're at a time where companies should collaborate, figure out what works, and be super transparent about what they're doing. Because
so what works?
So obviously cooking to 165 degrees, or actually, so the CDC, FDA, like all of these entities will say it needs to be 165 degrees for poultry and 145 for beef. That's, whole cuts, and then 160 for ground beef. But the reality is that's not, you could actually do less, but you have to adhere to time and temperature protocols. So there was a Korean study, where they, again, infected a bunch of birds. They like infecting things in these studies. They infected a bunch of birds and subjected the meat. I think they used a chicken breast and like duck thigh or something like that. And they looked at what the lethality was when they cooked at these different temperatures. And what they found is that it could be at the same time and temperature combos as the USDA, like salmonella guidelines, but actually it was a lot more sensitive. So you could cook at lower temperatures for longer, as opposed to that 165 number. 165 instantly will kill it.
Right.
But, you could cook it at like 160 for 3 minutes or something along those lines. I mean, it
What
was
about
even
HPP?
what?
What about HPP?
HPP, okay, so there have been studies. HPP is less reliable for viruses, and there have been studies that it has killed H5N1. But there's also been, I've looked at other studies that this was actually with like shellfish and different strains they looked at all different strains of viruses. And the issue seems to be is that certain mutations with higher levels of virulence can respond differently. But HPP can kill viruses, can kill avian flu, but I don't know that again, HPP is not my field of expertise, but there is more room for kind of error there or for things to change, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
With
What
viral
should
mutation.
I guess, I mean, you offer a very high quality human grade cooked food, but for people that are feeding raw, which are, a lot of people in our audience, I guess I'm asking what they should be looking for from the manufacturer.
I would be looking for HPP at this point. I think that that's really important. I would be looking for a testing protocol. Like now, testing for avian flu is not publicly available to companies. Like basically, if you're getting food that's like a raw ground that's like human grade, I can think of a few companies that just sell like a ground meat like straight from a facility and just like bag it in their, you know what I mean? That will have been tested if it's going through a USDA facility. Anything, so you're really going to want, if you're doing raw food, it to come through a USDA facility where it's inspected. So that would be the number one thing. Sourcing. If you're buying your own food, like, if you're home preparing, you have control over the sourcing because you're buying it. So you can have a little bit more transparency there. I think it's time for companies to be transparent about where they're getting their meat. Like we tell people where we're buying our meat, and we've in the past we were a little cagier about it because we're like, we don't want people stealing our vendors. It's, you know what? Yeah. You want to use our vendors, you pay for our vendors. They're expensive.
Yeah.
But I do think it's time. I do think it's time if raw food companies want people to trust them. And I think cooked food companies too. I think if pet food companies want people to trust us, we have to be transparent.
Well, and I think the other part of that is if your true concern is about the quality of the food, as a consumer, I'm a business owner, but I'm also a consumer. We control the industry with our buying power. So if we're trying to require higher quality, or when it comes to sourcing, know where the food is coming from, we can demand that from the people that we're buying it from. And
absolutely,
that, I think as a whole, will improve the entire supply food chain.
Yes, it's like, and you can you can even work with companies like, hey, I would buy from you, but, like do this thing, or I want to know this thing. This is the thing that's keeping me from buying from you. Companies have to get that little nudge to improve their practices. It's like, yeah, I want everyone to buy Evermore, right? I want people to support my company because we're doing the right thing. But I also want people to be like, hey, that company's cool. I would support them, but they're not doing this one thing I want them to do.
Sure.
Because absolutely. The more of us that are doing it right, the better.
Yeah. Agreed. So you talked about, if it's a cooked food, generally speaking, you're probably in the clear. We do have a lot of raw feeders. You're suggesting buying from a grocery store, at least human grade meat.
Yes.
Should raw feeders cook their food for the time being? And is it really the time being, because avian flu has been around for decades? Is this something that's going to keep coming back?
Yeah, that's a tough question, and I don't want to get like pilloried for it. I think it comes down to risk tolerance, right? I think it really comes down to risk tolerance. I mean, I even wrote this in my blog, and being willing to change your behavior if new information emerges. Right now, I would say the risk is still very low in terms of what you're feeding your animals. Right. But if it goes up, or if it seems like this is becoming more and more of a problem in terms of getting into our food supply, then I would absolutely say cook. But I think right now, as long as you're carefully sourcing your food, if you want to feed raw, go ahead and do it. But again, if you're And you're not going to find a vet in the US that's going to tell you this. But I would just be really, really careful about where you're getting your food from.
Right.
But if it were me and my pet, yes, I would be cooking. Like, I've stopped giving my cats, like, I get my eggs around the corner. And I actually think about that sometimes. Like, the eggs I buy from Farmer Ruth around the corner are probably less safe than the factory farmed eggs because no one is inspecting those eggs.
Sure.
But, now they don't get to like lick up the raw, like make scrambled eggs, we'll mix them up, and I let them like lick out the raw egg out of the bowl, and they're not allowed to do that anymore. This is a total aside, but I just kind of want to jump topics here really fast just because I brought up eggs. If you're going to the grocery store and you're very astute, you will notice a lot of the times that the like crappiest, most like factory farmed eggs that are just like not even cage free are at this point more expensive than the higher welfare eggs. I don't know. Has anyone noticed this?
I don't even look at the price of other eggs, to be honest.
So I at my local grocery store, the like best yet, like not even cage free eggs are like $15 a dozen or something crazy like that. And like the like pasture eggs are like half the price.
Why do you think this is?
Well, I know why this is. And it's because those, first of all, price gouging, but also because those are like large confinement operations. There could be like hundreds of thousands of birds under one roof. So if they have to cull, they're just getting rid of like that many birds that, by the way, can take like a very long time to get to like egg laying age. Whereas the higher welfare operations, those work as like networks of independent farmers. So you're dealing with like, a wider dispersal of like different farms.
They've probably seen less loss overall.
Yeah, exactly. It's less loss overall because like even if one of the farms in this like consortium of farmers gets hit, there's still all of these other farms. They're not just like these mega like under one roof operations. So I think that's why.
Yeah. No, I mean the egg prices have been crazy. I mentioned on our call earlier that I had to rehome our girls in our backyard, and I just didn't realize that the egg prices were just gonna double, triple in some cases in price. It's just insane.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. Although I did see an interview on like Fox the other night where our Secretary of Agriculture was telling people that they could save money on eggs by raising chickens in their backyards. 100% that's not true, right? Ruby, is raising chickens cheap?
No. Especially because now you're actually looking at the choices in your hands as to what you're going to feed them, right? Which is very different than even talking to your local farmer or rancher and being like, oh, what do you feed them? And they tell you all the good stuff. And now like you're like, okay, I have to go out and get this food. Yes, a lot of food waste, I think, decreased for us because they were eating a lot of our scraps and stuff. But I was feeding some really, really nice food to them and cleaning up their coop, all of the poop everywhere. I mean,
just like setting up the entire thing. You have to build a coop, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
So
it is not cheap at all.
And like cats and dogs, chickens are a commitment. So just do not think that you're going to save money on eggs by getting your chicken.
Unless it's like, a hobby or like a pastime that you want to start spending time doing, because it really is a commitment. I mean, I'd say we probably spent 2 to 3 hours a week at least on taking care of our chickens.
Yeah.
And again, it's go out of town and all that.
You need a chicken sitter, not just a dog sitter. You need a chicken sitter too.
Yeah. But you're far more confident in the eggs that you're eating. And I think it's also another thing to sort of like build a bond with nature and animals because they're giving and we're eating. That's great.
No, there is nothing like well-raised chicken eggs, like super free range, well-fed. Those eggs are definitely better than anything you will get at the grocery store. Yeah, but I'll just get them from the person around the corner out of their like little fridge. They like leave the $5 instead of doing it myself.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Amanda chimed in and she says we have chickens and love taking care of them. You do, you girl. More power to you, because I found that it was really hard for me to keep up this last year.
Yeah, and for the backyard chicken folks, you're not out of the like woods with avian flu either. There were about in the past month, there have been about 51 avian flu cases across the country. So just
Is there
be aware of
a
that.
particular area of America where we're seeing higher cases?
California is getting hit, but it's actually all over. I mean, New York City just had a bunch getting killed, so it's the entire country. I just think California has a lot of agricultural operations, but it's really everywhere.
Yeah, and more like open types of
Yeah.
farms and the winds. We have a lot of winds.
Yeah, you got a lot of wins. But if you're the sort of person who likes getting way too obsessed with things, you can go on the USDA website and they have like avian flu trackers by like whether it's like wildlife or chickens, and they categorize it by backyard chicken or regular chicken. Then they're basically, if you want to see an updated daily where avian flu outbreaks are being reported, you can spend all the time you want on the avian flu dashboard on the USDA website, which, by the way, you do it on desktop because it does not work on mobile. So that's just, can you tell I've been down a few rabbit holes?
If there's anyone in the world that I would think is perusing the USDA database for avian flu stats, it would be you.
I don't know if that's a positive distinction. So I actually did want to go, when we were talking about raw chicken and whether or not I recommend it. Again, for my cats, I wouldn't. But there's a thing with beef. I just want to talk about that because this just hit me like a light bulb moment last night. So dairy cows, right? They're getting very infected and a lot of herds. So what people don't realize is when dairy cows get culled, after they are done with their milk producing years, they go into the meat supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about 1/10 of the cows that are killed for meat in this country are actually dairy cows. They taste like crap. So they tend to go into the ground. They're sold as ground meat, right? They're in ground meat products. So I would also be wary of ground meat. Obviously, if you're buying from a better company and it's known sourcing, that's one thing. But I wouldn't, if something is questionable and it's ground beef, I would definitely fully cook it.
Okay, good to know. And yeah. I think just for us as a general thing, we teach our real dog food workshops and how to put your DIY meals together. We typically say not to do ground meat if you, I mean, I get it, but all this different surfaces that it touches and hands that it comes in contact with, we're just trying to minimally process.
Smart, because ground meat is very, it is, there's a reason why it has way higher cooking temperature recommendations than whole cuts.
Yep. Okay, so we've got just a few minutes left, and I want to talk a little bit more about food safety and answer any questions you guys have generally about food safety or about the avian flu. I mean, this, like I said, is a big topic and probably one that I think we're going to continue talking about for the rest of this year.
Unfortunately.
Going forward. But I know there's a lot of misinformation about pet food safety. Like, have you encountered myths that you think are important to share with our audience, or things that people just are misinformed about?
Oh, that's actually a really good question. And I'm not even sure because I make a cooked food, so I don't know. One thing, actually, okay, this is one, and it's avian flu specific. And this is mostly cats, but I've heard about dogs too, that the pH of your pet's stomach will kill a virus. And that's actually, it can be true, but things like the avian flu, this is respiratory. So it doesn't matter what is happening in your pet's stomach if we're dealing with a respiratory disease. And that's actually been driving me crazy because I'm seeing like vets posting this. I don't know if you've seen this on the socials.
I haven't. No.
But I've been seeing vets posting about how the pH of like your pet's stomach can kill a virus. So there's like nothing to worry about.
Yeah. Well, I think as a general matter, at least in America, I think our public education system has failed a lot of us when it comes to the difference between viruses and bacteria.
Yeah.
Or even like salmonella, right? You have to cook all the eggs because every chicken is carrying salmonella. That's a terrible one.
So that was one. Honestly, I can't, in terms of pet food, I'm really specifically trying to think of any, and I'm a little bit of a loss. I'm sure I know them and I hear them every day.
Right.
Not so much safety myths. Like I'm not really hearing safety myths such as your usual, like kibble cleans your teeth and like those kinds of stupid myths.
Yeah.
But unless you're thinking of something, Ruby, do you have something
No,
like in your mind?
that was really just a general question of like
Yeah,
you're
I
saying.
don't think I get any like weird myths about food safety. I think I get people that are like overly or underly paranoid about things, if
Sure.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
But
No, and I think in this instance there was a lot of fear mongering. What came across as fear mongering because there were valid deaths very early on, but as you said, so many raw food companies just started coming out with their statements of transparency and sourcing, but it was all like no one's really answering the question
no,
here of
no
like,
one's really answering the question.
yeah,
And I think well actually this is something we've been coming up we're coming out with treats, right? And they're freeze dried. And we're putting raw animal parts and freeze drying them. And so I was thinking, and this is literally buying a pallet of gizzards, like right as avian flu is hitting.
yeah,
So we're just like, oh my God, these treats. We know that they're fine. Like, if they're Mary's gizzards, we know the date that they were processed on. We know that there wasn't even any avian flu in the entire state. Their turkeys from Utah. Like during the month that these turkeys were processed. Like we 100% know that they're fine. But we're still like, okay, what can we do with our process to guarantee it more? This comes back to that time and temperature stuff from earlier.
mm-hmm.
This is something people don't realize about freeze drying. And I think so in freeze drying, there's actually, you raise the temperature of the meat that you're freeze drying or the produce that you're freeze drying before you drop it.
Right.
And that's to like, it's like the heat energy to create the sublimation. I don't know. Speaking of public education, I like sucked at chemistry.
I think the simple explanation is when you're freeze drying, you need to remove the moisture.
It's removing the moisture, but then there's something else about like creating the sublimation process that's like more complicated. But yes, it's to remove the moisture as well. But so you can raise the temperature. And if you can raise the temperature for like 5 minutes in these machines, you can raise the temperature for 5 hours in these machines. So that's basically what we decided to do with our treats. We decided that for our poultry, and the machine will only get it up to where we can get the chicken to like, or the turkey to like 160. That's as high as we can heat anything. But like we know from the time and temperature, like logical standpoint that this should be fine, right? Mm-hmm. But like we can't run the test to like actually validate it. Like we're going to do our usual post-production pathogen testing on it. Mm-hmm. And if anything else showed up weird, then we would, do more of an investigation. But we know that there's not avian flu there just because of what we know about the raw materials. But that's sort of like the logical, like, okay, can we modify this freeze drying process to work for us from a food safety standpoint?
You're increasing the temperature to 160 for 5 hours before dropping it to freeze.
I think we're gonna hold. I mean, I think the whole process takes like some crazy amount of time. It's like 24 hours, but like we're getting it up to the 160 and holding it at 160 for an hour. Like theoretically, holding it at 160 for like a minute should like more than do the job. Right. So we're doing that, and then so that's for our turkey gizzards, and then we're doing grass-fed beef kidney and this salmon that's like raised in a really cool way. It's sort of this regenerative aquaculture thing, which I can talk about on a future live.
Very cool.
But we're doing those to the USDA temperatures recommended for those, which is 145. So it is our belief, based on like logic, that this is a valid like food safety step. Yeah. But that said, we haven't done like what would be called like an inoculation test, right? Which is, and this is a food safety thing. So basically, if you really want to validate a process, you use what's called inoculation. And if it were to be the avian flu, we would have a company basically replicate our process, but beforehand, like inject a virus that's similar to the avian flu, but like if there's some sort of like lab leak situation, it's like harmless. So then you would test that. You would go through the entire process, test the food beforehand and test the food afterwards to like make sure that there was like enough of a logarithmic reduction, which that's a whole other concept, to guarantee food safety.
Right. And you can't actually eliminate the entire virus.
Yeah, it's like pretty much impossible. It just like keeps getting exponentially and exponentially and exponentially smaller. Like it's this whole math thing that I think if you hit a certain log, it is possible. I think it's like log 11 or something.
Well, I think you're essentially deactivating.
You're basically deactivating it. Well, there's killing and then there's deactivating.
Right.
So like HPP is a deactivation, whereas cooking is a kill step. They are different.
Yes.
Which we should have talked about before when we were talking about HPP.
Yeah, well, that's okay. I mean, that's why it's coming up, and I think people should be more aware of this terminology so you can ask the right kinds of questions. Because I think even within our industry, everyone's doing their best, and oftentimes, I think you and I, we make our own food, so we literally can have a hand in the process of the food before it ever reaches our end customer. But there are a lot of third-party manufacturers that will, one facility that makes food for maybe 3 or 4 kibble or even raw pet food companies. And so there's potential for contamination from one brand. Yeah. To all of the brands that are made within that same building.
We don't own our, I just want to we don't own our facility. We work with a USDA kitchen. They're like a human food company. They make Italian prepared foods, actually. So I do wanted to say that we do all of our own sourcing, which I think is a huge distinction. So most companies, if we were to go to a third-party manufacturer, they would literally order all of our ingredients for us through their suppliers.
Right.
And then they would charge a margin on them. But so we do have a hand in the food, but it's sort of, for us, it's like more of a hybrid process.
Sure. No, but and then I still have to really commend you even on that extra step with freeze drying your treats, because I will say we've dabbled in freeze drying a little bit, and it's a very high energy consuming process. So to turn the heat up from 1 minute to an hour,
we're paying. Believe me, we're paying for it. I mean, we are working with a facility that's doing that, who are kind of more experts in it. But we're paying for the time that is going into this.
Yeah, but I mean, it's wonderful that you are, even already knowing that it's clean sourcing because you know where the food is coming from, that there's very, very low likelihood of infection, that you're still taking this additional step.
I think we have to. I really think we have to. And if it's just leading by example, even, I think it's really important that everyone do what they can to raise the bar. And I really, really, really wish as companies, we all would stop being snarky with each other. And we are competitors. And I'll admit, I can be a little hackles up too. But I do think that the sort of boutique, smaller wellness side of the industry, if we could collaborate on doing things like these inoculation tests on various processes, that is really expensive for a small company. Companies our size don't do this. Mm-hmm. But, if 4 or 5 companies got together and we're like, hey, we want to test this process, it would be, because I don't think processes for safety should be proprietary. Sure. Cooking to a certain temperature is not proprietary. We all know that if you cook to this temperature, it's a kill step. Why would it be harmful if we all knew, hey, if you use this specific freeze drying protocol or this specific HPP protocol, it will be the most effective. That should not be proprietary information.
I hear you. Well, hopefully our audience now knows some of the terminology and things to ask if they're doing a pre-made food. I think we're far too removed from where our food comes from generally, and even more so when it comes to what we're feeding our cats and our dogs. So this was really helpful. I'm really, really glad that you came on to talk about this. Any last pieces of advice that you'd like to share?
This is what I say every time to everyone: ask questions. Always ask questions and question the answers. Don't do anything. Yeah. That is my advice.
When are your new treats already out, or
they are not already out? They're getting done. So we actually have to redo our website for people to be able to buy them with our current platform. So we are going to have them within a couple of weeks for people who are actual subscribers who are subscribing to the food. They'll be able to get treats on the back end. We will have them available to wholesale for retailers, but it might be a hot minute before you can go on the website and buy them a la carte.
Very cool. Well,
Yeah.
congratulations on those new products.
Thank you.
Before I let you go, I have to say I texted Kay because she mentioned to me something not too long ago about why cats tend to be more susceptible than dogs to getting the avian flu. Are you familiar with the reasoning?
I don't. Does she know? Because I actually don't know why, other than that they're just like cats are freaking weird.
Yeah, no.
What is the reason?
First of all, Kay is a jury duty, and I know she doesn't want to be there because she sent me a long ass message with the citations to the research papers.
Oh man, I want that. But yeah, so why do cats?
Yeah.
Why is it?
I'm just gonna read this out loud to you because I can't do two things at once anymore. But she says avian influenza viruses such as H5N1 or H5N8 primarily target specific receptors on host cells called alpha 2 3-sialic acid receptors, which are abundant in birds. These receptors are present in dogs, but in much lower quantities within their respiratory tracts, making dogs less susceptible to avian influenza.
Oh, so cats have more receptors.
Yeah. Instead, dogs primarily have alpha 2 6 instead of alpha 2 3 sialic acid receptors targeted by mammalian influenza viruses. And this receptor profile significantly reduces the likelihood of a dog contracting or becoming seriously ill from avian influenza. And she sent me all the studies, so I can forward that to you and to anyone that's on this live. Shoot us a DM and we'll be happy to forward those to you as well if you're interested.
That would be awesome. But everyone remember, when it comes to viruses, they mutate.
That's right. No, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're just about out of time. Thank you again, Hannah, for joining us on this live today. For those of you that joined us and don't have tickets yet for this year's Feed Real Summit, it is this October 11th and 12th here in San Diego, and Hannah is going to be one of our amazing speakers. So make sure you get your tickets. Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, guys. I got you, Tisha. I saw your message. I'll forward those over to you.